My daughter called me at 2:37 in the morning. I know the exact time because I'd been lying awake anyway, the way I do most nights since my wife passed, staring at the ceiling and listening to the house breathe around me. Dad. Her voice was different, tight, the way it gets when she's trying not to cry and failing at it. Dad, I need you to listen to me very carefully. My daughter is a CPA. She's been doing forensic accounting for 17 years, the kind of work where she follows money trails for law firms and estate disputes. When she tells you to listen carefully, you listen. Okay, I said, I'm listening. I was going through some files tonight, work stuff, nothing unusual, and I found something. A pause. Dad, I found your name. I sat up in bed. What do you mean you found my name? In a property transfer document from 6 weeks ago. Her voice cracked, just slightly. Dad, someone filed paperwork transferring the deed on the farmhouse to a shell company. I didn't say anything for a moment. The farmhouse, 41 acres outside of Tulsa that my grandfather broke his back to pay off, that my father maintained for 30 years, that I've lived in for the last 22. The farmhouse where my wife grew up her roses along the south fence, where my grandchildren learned to fish in the pond out back. That's not possible, I said. I never signed anything like that. I know, she said. That's why I'm calling you at 3 in the morning. Dad, your signature is on this document, and it's not your signature. My name is Frank. I'm 64 years old. I spent 31 years as a structural engineer before my knees decided they'd had enough of job sites. And now I spend my retirement doing what I always wanted, fixing up old furniture, keeping a small vegetable garden, and helping my daughter's kids with their homework on weekends. I am not a dramatic man. I don't exaggerate. When I tell you that what my daughter said next stopped my blood cold, I mean it literally. I felt it, the chills spreading from my chest outward. Dad, the shell company is registered to a P.O. box in Nevada. But the registered agent, the person who set it up, their contact email has a name associated with it. She hesitated. It's Mitch. Mitch, my son-in-law, my other daughter's husband. I closed my eyes. My younger daughter had met Mitch 4 years ago at some charity golf event. He was charming the way certain men are charming, effortlessly, instinctively, like breathing. Good-looking in a polished way. Always had the right thing to say. He sold commercial real estate and talked about it constantly. Deals closing and properties turning over and money moving around like water finding its level. I'd never warmed to him, but I kept that to myself because my daughter loved him, and that was what mattered. Or so I thought. You're sure? I asked. I'm sure. I've been staring at this for 2 hours. Dad, I didn't want to call you until I was absolutely certain. Another pause. There's more. There always is. The document hadn't just transferred the deed. It had done so as part of what appeared to be a larger transaction. The farmhouse used as collateral against a loan my daughter had found attached to an LLC that Mitch had opened 8 months ago. The loan was for $340,000. The farmhouse, according to the county assessor's office, was worth $380,000. He borrowed against my property, without my knowledge, without my consent, with a signature that wasn't mine. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I sat in the kitchen with the lights on, drinking coffee I didn't taste, watching the dark outside the windows slowly turn gray. The vegetable garden started taking shape as the sun came up. The tomato cages, the pole beans, the little plot of marigolds my wife had planted the summer before she died because she read somewhere that they kept the aphids off. She would have known what to do. She always knew. By 7 in the morning, I had called my attorney. His name is Stewart, and we've been friends since our kids were in Little League together. He's semi-retired now, does estate work mostly, but when I told him what my daughter had found, he went very quiet in the way that lawyers go quiet when they're thinking fast. Don't touch anything, he said. Don't call your younger daughter, don't confront Mitch, don't tell anyone else yet. Can you get me copies of everything your daughter found? She's already emailing them. Good. Frank, I want you to sit tight today. I'm going to make some calls. Sitting tight is not something I'm naturally good at. I am a man who fixes things. Structural problems, load-bearing calculations, rotting wood and cracked foundations. I spent my career looking at broken things and figuring out how to stabilize them. Sitting in my kitchen while someone else made calls felt like standing outside a burning building without my tools. But I sat tight. By noon, Stuart called back. What he'd found in those few hours made the morning's news feel almost gentle by comparison. The forged deed wasn't the only document. There was a second one, a power of attorney, also bearing my signature, also forged, dated 3 months earlier. And the power of attorney had been used to open 2 financial accounts in my name at a bank I'd never done business with. One had a balance of just over $12,000. The other had been opened and emptied, $48,000, moved through 3 transfers and gone. $60,000 I hadn't known I had. $60,000 I hadn't known was missing. Stuart, I said slowly, how does someone do this? Carefully, he said, and with access to your personal information, social security number, date of birth, mother's maiden name, the basic package. A pause. Frank, who has that kind of access to your information? I thought about it. My daughter, the accountant, the one who'd found this. She had some of it from helping me with taxes, but she'd called me at 3 a.m. to warn me. And then I thought about the other daughter, and Mitch, and the fact that my younger daughter had asked me, about 18 months ago, if she could keep some of my important documents at their house. She'd said they had a fireproof safe. She was worried about me being out on the farm alone. What if something happened? She seemed so concerned. She seemed so loving. I'd said yes. I gave Stuart the name of the bank where those accounts had been opened. He said he'd contact a colleague who handled fraud cases. That evening, my daughter, the accountant, I should call her by something more personal. She'd hate being reduced to a job title, so I'll call her Nell because that's her name. Nell came to the farm. She brought her husband and her 2 kids, ostensibly for dinner, which was cover in case anyone was watching. She didn't say that explicitly. She didn't have to. We sat at the kitchen table after the kids had gone outside to the yard, and she spread out printouts in front of me the way she lays out audit findings for clients. Methodical. Clear. Everything labeled and ordered. Here's the timeline, she said. The power of attorney was filed in Osage County 8 months ago. That's when Mitch opened the LLC. 6 weeks ago, the deed transfer. 3 weeks ago, the second bank account got emptied. What's he doing with the money? I asked. I don't know yet, but the LLC is listed as a real estate investment company. My guess, and it's just a guess, is that he's either using it to fund deals that aren't performing or he's got debt somewhere that he's servicing quietly. I thought about Mitch's car. New, always new. The vacation they'd taken to Portugal last spring, the renovations they'd done on their house in Broken Arrow, new kitchen, new primary bath, the kind of work that runs $60,000, $70,000 minimum. He's overextended, I said. Nell nodded slowly. That's my read. I looked out the window at the yard. My grandson was attempting to teach my granddaughter how to throw a spiral. Badly, but enthusiastically. The evening light was coming in low and gold across the grass, the way it does in October in Oklahoma. And the world looked completely ordinary and completely broken at the same time. Does your sister know? I asked. Nell was quiet for a moment. I don't know. I genuinely don't know. That was a question I'd been circling all day, the one I didn't want to land on. Because there were 2 possible answers, and both of them hurt. Either my younger daughter knew what her husband was doing and had helped him, had given him my documents and smiled at me across the Thanksgiving table while he built a criminal case against me. Or she didn't know, and her husband had used her trust the same way he'd used mine, and she was going to be shattered when this came out. I didn't sleep that night either. Stuart called the next morning. He'd spoken to his colleague, a woman who worked financial fraud cases, and she had contacted the county sheriff's office and the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation. Forged deeds were a felony. The forged power of attorney compounded it. The unauthorized bank accounts meant he committed identity theft, And the missing $48,000 meant there was a concrete theft to prosecute, not just paperwork. "How long?" I asked. "They'll move carefully. They want to build the full picture before they approach him. Could be a few weeks." A few weeks is sitting across from Mitch at Sunday dinners. A few weeks of answering my younger daughter's texts about whether I was coming to her son's birthday party. A few weeks of pretending. I'm not built for pretending, but I learned. The hardest moment came 10 days in. My younger daughter called on a Tuesday afternoon just to chat, the way she does. She asked how the garden was. She asked if I'd watched the game. She mentioned that Mitch was thinking about a big deal that might really change things for them, something he was excited about. She didn't know all the details, but he seemed confident. I gripped the phone and thought about my wife, about what she would say. She had a phrase she used whenever I was about to act on anger instead of patience. "Finish the thought, Frank," meaning, don't react to the beginning of the situation when you don't know the end of it yet. I finished the thought. I said, "Yes, the garden's good. Yes, I saw the game. That sounds exciting." Tell him I said good luck. I hung up and went out to the garage and hid a punching bag I've kept out there since my 40s, for exactly this kind of reason, until my arms gave out. The investigators moved in on a Thursday morning, 3.5 weeks after Nell's phone call. I wasn't there. Stewart had advised me to stay away, and he was right, but knowing that didn't make sitting at the kitchen table any easier. Nell was with me. We drank coffee and didn't talk much. Her phone rang just after 9:30. She looked at the screen and said, quietly, "It's her." "My younger daughter. I'll call her Kay because that's her name." Nell answered. I could hear Kay's voice through the phone, high, confused, scared. Nell said, I know, I'm going to explain everything. Just stay calm. Where are you right now?" Kay was at home. The investigators had come to the house. They'd taken Mitch in for questioning and taken his computers and his phone. Kay had no idea what was happening. She'd been crying since 8 o'clock. A neighbor had come over to sit with her kids. Nell drove over. I stayed at the farm. The call came at 1 in the afternoon. Nell, from Kay's house, voice careful and measured the way it gets when she's managing something difficult. "She didn't know," Nell said. "I believe her, Dad. She's not okay." But she didn't know. I breathed for what felt like the first time in weeks. "She wants to talk to you." I wasn't ready for that. I told Nell to tell Kay I loved her and I'd come see her soon when things were clearer. That was honest. Clearer was going to take time. What became clear over the following days, Mitch had been doing this longer and wider than we'd first thought. 2 other families connected to his LLC. One his own parents, one an elderly couple who'd been clients of his real estate firm. In all 3 cases, he'd used the same method: access to personal documents, forged signatures, property used as collateral or quietly transferred. Total exposure across all victims was somewhere north of $800,000. He had a gambling problem that had been escalating for 2 years. The deals he'd described to Kay as confident and promising were, in reality, losses he'd been covering with stolen money. The prosecutor's office charged him with 4 counts of forgery, 2 counts of identity theft, 1 count of fraud, and 1 count of theft by deception. In Oklahoma, forgery of a deed is a felony carrying up to 7 years. He was looking at consecutive sentencing across multiple counts. He did not post bail. Kay filed for divorce 12 days after his arrest. She did it without asking my advice or Nell's, which told me something about who she was underneath the shock. She'd made up her mind quickly and quietly, the way women sometimes do when they've been holding themselves together too long, and finally something cracks all the way through. Her lawyer moved fast on asset protection. Mitch's attorney tried to argue that Kay had knowledge of the scheme. The DA's investigation found no evidence of that because there was none. She came to the farm about 3 weeks after his arrest, a Saturday, late afternoon, October, sliding toward November. I was in the garage working on an old dresser I'd been refinishing, a piece that had belonged to my wife's mother, that I'd been meaning to get to for 2 years and kept putting off. Kay knocked on the side door. I told her to come in. She looked like she'd been through something, which she had. dark under the eyes, thinner in the face. She sat on an overturned crate and watched me work for a minute without saying anything. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "For what? You didn't do anything." "I gave him access to you." Her voice was careful and controlled, and clearly costing her something. "I asked you to let us keep your documents. I thought I was helping. I thought he was." She stopped. "I should have seen it." "Maybe, but you loved him. People miss things when they love someone." She was quiet for a moment. I kept sanding the side panel of the dresser. Slow strokes with the grain the way my father taught me. "Are you angry with me?" she asked. I thought about it, really thought about it, which is what she deserved. "I was," I said. "Not at what you did, but at what happened. It took me a while to separate those things." "And now?" "Now I'm mostly just tired." I set the sandpaper down. "Kay, he used you. He used your trust and your love for me, and he turned them into a tool. That's not on you. That's on him." She cried then. Not loudly, not dramatically. Kay's not built that way, but steadily, the way rain comes in November, like it's been waiting. I didn't go to her immediately. I let her cry for a bit because she needed to, and then I went and sat on a crate beside her and put my arm around her shoulders. And we sat in the garage with the smell of sawdust and linseed oil around us until it got dark. I don't know when I'll fully forgive her. I don't know if she'll fully forgive herself, but she was still my daughter, and that didn't stop being true because of what her husband had done. The civil proceedings were slower and more grinding than the criminal case. My attorney filed suit against Mitch and his LLC for the forged deed, the fraudulent power of attorney, and the stolen funds, because there was a guilty plea on the criminal charges. He took a deal after 2 weeks. 15 counts reduced to 8, 6 years in a state facility. The civil case was largely a formality. The deed transfer was nullified. The fraudulent accounts were closed and the remaining funds recovered. The $48,000 was gone. Mitch had moved it through a sports betting account. The prosecutor told me there was essentially no chance of recovering it. I had expected that. It still landed badly. Stuart and I had dinner the night after the final civil hearing. We went to the same diner we've been going to since our kids were in Little League corner booth. Bad coffee. The best chicken fried steak in Tulsa County. We've been going there for 30 years. "You did well," he said. "I lost $48,000. You kept your farm. You kept your name. You kept your daughters." He poured more coffee. "Some people in your position lose all of it." He was right. I knew he was right. It still felt like loss, dressed up in paperwork, which is what winning usually feels like. What I didn't expect was the postcard. About 6 weeks after everything concluded, I found one in my mailbox, handwritten. Mitch's mother's handwriting, which I recognized from birthday cards over the years. She wrote that she was sorry for what her son had done, that she'd had no idea, that she hoped someday I might be able to separate her from him the way you have to sometimes, with families. I put it on the kitchen counter and looked at it for a few days. Then I wrote her back. Just a few lines. I didn't absolve anyone or promise anything, but I acknowledged that she'd written and that I appreciated it. Small things, but they matter. The dresser is finished now. It turned out beautifully. The original walnut grain came up clean under the old finish, and I found some period-correct hardware at an estate sale that matches perfectly. It's sitting in the living room where my wife used to keep her books. When my granddaughter asked me whose it was, I told her it was her great-grandmother's, and that it had been in the family a long time, and that things built well tend to last. She nodded seriously, the way 8-year-olds do when they're absorbing something they don't quite understand, but sense is important. I'm 64 years old. I rebuilt a career after an injury took me off job sites. I buried my wife. I nearly lost my grandfather's land to a man who smiled at my table for 4 years. I did not lose it. The farm is still mine. The deed is clean. The marigolds my wife planted came back this spring without any help from me, the way they do, stubborn and bright along the south fence. Some things hold together because they were built right. Some things hold together because you refuse to let them fall. Most of the time, it's both. Nell came by last Sunday with her kids. We sat on the porch in the evening and watched the light change over the field, which is one of the better things a person can do with a Sunday in Oklahoma. She asked how I was doing. Better, I said, and it was true. Are you angry anymore? I thought about Mitch, sitting somewhere in a state facility, learning what it means to have your choices catch up to you. I thought about Kay, working hard and paying attention and rebuilding something solid out of what he left behind. I thought about the farm and the dresser and the marigolds coming back. Not really, I said. Anger takes energy. I've got other things to do. She laughed. Her daughter climbed into my lap and demanded to know if we could go look at the pond, and I said yes. And we all walked out to the back of the property in the last of the light, 4 generations of this family on this land. The water was still and the evening was quiet, and somewhere out in the field a mockingbird was running through its catalog, copying every sound it had ever heard, making something new out of borrowed pieces. I've been doing this long enough to know that's how most good things get made. I keep thinking about the moment I handed over those documents. Kay asked so gently, so reasonably. She was worried about me, she said, alone out on the farm. What if something happened? And I said yes without hesitating, because that's what you do when your child says she loves you and wants to protect you. You trust her. You don't ask what she plans to do with the paperwork. You don't imagine that the man sitting across from you at Thanksgiving is already calculating what your land is worth. That's not naivety. That's what love looks like when it hasn't been tested yet. What I've learned, not from reading it somewhere, but from living it, is that the people who take advantage of you almost never look like predators. Mitch didn't. He looked like a son-in-law. He looked like a son-in-law. He looked like someone building a life. And that's exactly the cover he needed. The harm he did wasn't random. It was built on my trust, on Kay's trust, on the assumption that family doesn't require the kind of scrutiny you'd apply to a stranger. He counted on that. It was his whole method. But here's what he got wrong. He assumed that because I was 64 and retired and living quietly on a farm, I was already diminished. That I'd be easy to manage, easy to confuse, easy to outlast. That's the gamble people make when they target someone older. They bet on passivity. They bet that the fight's already gone out of you. It hadn't. Nell is the reason I still have my farm, not because she swooped in and rescued me. She'd hate that framing, and it isn't accurate, but because she spent 17 years building the kind of sharp, patient intelligence that lets you see what other people miss. She looked at a routine file on a Tuesday night and recognized my name in a place it had no business being. That's not luck. That's what happens when you spend years developing the discipline to look carefully at things, to ask the right questions, to follow the evidence wherever it leads, even when it leads somewhere you don't want to go. She made a hard call at 3 in the morning, knowing it would upend everything. She did it anyway. That's the kind of clear thinking that actually protects people. And Kay, I don't say this lightly because the hurt is still real. Kay showed me something too. Not what she did wrong, but what she did when the truth came out. She didn't argue. She didn't protect him. She didn't wait for someone to tell her what to feel. She filed for divorce in 12 days and got her kids secured and started rebuilding. That takes something most people don't realize they have until they need it. The ability to absorb a devastating truth and keep moving forward anyway. She could have collapsed. She chose not to. What I know now, after all of it, is that the 3 things that actually carried us through this had nothing to do with luck or money or connections. It was Nell's willingness to do the right thing, even when it was the hardest thing. It was the intelligence she'd spent years sharpening without knowing she'd need it for this. And it was the stubbornness, mine, hers, Kay's, to not lie down when someone tried to take what was ours. The marigolds came back this spring. I didn't plant them. They just came back, the way some things do when the ground is still good underneath. That's enough for me.